Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's press conference. Bienvenue à cette conférence de presse. My name is Mia Rabson. I am a reporter with the Canadian Press, and I will be moderating today's press conference. As usual, we will have one question and one answer, and we will start with speakers. I think they don't really need introductions, so I will let them introduce themselves if they feel the need. Go ahead.
Okay, well, it's impossible for me not to introduce myself after that. So good afternoon. I'm Chrystia Freeland. I'll speak first about the measures I tabled today. Then I'll turn it over to Minister Champagne, who will speak to the work we're doing through our fall economic statement to enhance competition and stabilize prices. Then we'll pass it over to Minister Fraser, who will speak about the measures in our fall economic statement that will build more homes faster. And then to Minister Anand, who will speak to the work our government is doing to crack down on junk fees. This morning, I tabled the Notice of Ways and Means motion for the Fall Economic Statement Implementation Act, which is the next step in our government's economic plan. There are three aspects of this legislation that I'd like to focus on. Tout d'abord, nous rendons la vie des Canadiennes et des Canadiens plus abordable. Comme l'expliquera le ministre Champagne, nous apportons des changements générationnels au droit de la concurrence au Canada, ce qui contribuera à stabiliser les prix et à offrir plus de choix aux Canadiennes et aux Canadiens. Nous supprimons la TPS et la TVH sur les services de counseling et de psychothérapie afin que les gens puissent recevoir le soutien et les soins de santé mentale dont ils ont besoin. Nous élargissons l'accès à l'assurance emploi pour inclure les parents qui adoptent et nous instaurons un nouveau congé pour les travailleuses sous réglementation fédérale qui subissent une fausse couche parce que chaque famille, peu importe comment elle a été fondée, a besoin de temps pour tisser des liens et que chaque femme devrait avoir le temps de se remettre de la perte douloureuse d'une grossesse. Ensuite, comme le ministre Fraser vous le dira, nous construisons plus de logements plus rapidement. Nous avons déjà pris des mesures importantes cet automne pour construire plus de 100 000 nouveaux logements au Canada. L'une des principales mesures que nous avons prises a été de supprimer la TPS sur les nouvelles constructions de logements locatifs, y compris les coopératives d'habitation. Nous voulons changer l'équation pour les constructeurs afin de les encourager à construire plus de logements qui autrement n'auraient pas atteint le stade de la construction. Et surtout, nous voulons construire plus de logements pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens plus rapidement. Third, we're building an economy that works for everyone with good jobs that people can count on. And so today, I am so glad to announce that we are delivering the investment tax credits for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and the investment tax credits for clean technology. These are the first two of our 5 clean economy investment tax credits. When the parliamentary process is complete, the Notice of Ways and Means motion I tabled today and the subsequent legislation, it will enshrine these investment tax credits into law. The money will be there for businesses to make use of them and to make investment decisions based on them, and most crucially, to make investments that will create great careers for more Canadians today and tomorrow. Our plan is working. In the first half of this year, Canada received the most foreign direct investment per capita of any country in the G7, and the third most investment in gross dollar terms in the entire world. The tax credits we are delivering today will build on this record by bringing more investment to Canada, helping our companies to grow, and critically, creating more great jobs for Canadians across the country. We are also introducing labor requirements to our clean technology, clean hydrogen, clean electricity, and carbon capture, utilization, and storage investment tax credits. These requirements are about ensuring that Canadian workers directly benefit from our investment tax credits by requiring businesses who take advantage of these credits to pay a prevailing union wage and to create apprenticeship opportunities if they want to receive the maximum level of benefit from the tax credits. This is the first time in Canadian history that this has been done, and it is further proof of our commitment to ensure that our economic plan is focused on workers and delivers for Canadian workers and their families. So, a big day. Thank you very much for being here. And let me now pass it over to François-Philippe. À vous la parole.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. Au cours des dernières semaines, je vous ai parlé à plusieurs reprises de ce que nous faisons pour stabiliser les prix à l'épicerie. Vous m'avez entendu maintes fois, la solution dont on a besoin, c'est plus de concurrence au pays. Je vais revenir à la concurrence dans un instant, mais d'abord, j'aimerais prendre un moment pour souligner que récemment, certains épiciers ont annoncé des mesures pour donner un peu plus de répit aux consommateurs canadiens. Just last week, as you may have seen, the Toronto Star reported that some of the major grocers have put forward actions following the commitments they made to Canadians. Is it enough? The answer is simple, clearly not. Am I satisfied? You know me, no. And I expect more, and I would say as Canadians expect more as well. But these signals are certainly pointing in the right direction. Something else that's pointing in the right direction are Statistics Canada's most recent numbers showing a downward trend in food inflation. And you can count on us to continue to hold the grocers' feet to the fire for more actions in the weeks and months to come. C'est pourquoi nous redoublons nos efforts pour réformer la concurrence au Canada, chose qui n'a pas été faite depuis les derniers 20 ans. Quand on parle de réformer la concurrence, on parle de concurrence dans tous les secteurs d'activité de l'économie canadienne. Parce qu'on sait que plus de concurrence, ça se traduit par plus d'options pour les consommateurs, ce qui favorise bien évidemment de meilleurs prix. La semaine dernière, dans sa mise à jour économique, la ministre des Finances a présenté des amendements supplémentaires à la loi sur la concurrence, en plus des amendements proposés dans notre projet de loi sur l'abordabilité, le projet de loi C-56. Between our affordability bill and the reforms that are proposed in the fall economic statement, we are bolstering competition across the economy in the names of Canadian consumers. And I would say for people watching at home, this is the most comprehensive reform, I would say, in decades in this country. And it's a cornerstone of what Minister Freeland just explained about the affordability agenda we have put. We know that the best way to have more affordability is to have more competition in this country. And let me tell you how we're doing this. We are doing this by giving subpoena power to the Bureau to enforce companies like those in the grocery sector to provide information as part of market studies. And I would say this is something that is much needed. And we were an outlier, I would say, in the number of G7 countries not having subpoena power for the enforcement authority. By only allowing mergers to go forward when those mergers benefit consumers. I would say that goes without saying. That's why we need to reform Competition Act. By making it illegal for large grocery chains to prevent independent grocers from setting up shop in the same commercial building or complex. And I can tell you, having spoken to some grocers south of our border, that has been one of the factors that has prevented them from looking at the Canadian market. So that's going to be very relevant. By making it easier for the Bureau to tackle abuse of dominance by large firms and to address anti-competitive behaviors. By removing barriers for repairing products. I'm sure people watching at home will be interested in that. That means manufacturers can face enforcement when they restrict access to parts, information, and manuals to limit competition, something that I would say a number of Canadians have been facing. And more will be included in the Fall Economic Statement Implementation Bill to tackle anti-competitive behavior. One of those that you would have seen is around, for example, misleading greenwashing that we've seen some companies engaging in. Ensemble, ces réformes vont aider les PME qui souvent finissent par payer le prix pour un environnement, un cadre concurrentiel qui est désuet. Elles aideront aussi les nouveaux joueurs qui veulent apporter de nouvelles idées, des produits et des investissements dans des secteurs qui ont toujours été dominés par les mêmes acteurs dans notre pays. These changes are good for business, will strengthen our economy, and benefit all Canadians. Every day is a good day to fight for Canadians, and that's why we'll keep working to make sure these changes are adopted quickly. If the Conservatives really wanted to make life more affordable for Canadians, they will help us give more powers to the Competition Bureau by supporting this long overdue reform to the Competition Act. So with more, I will turn over to my colleague, Mr. Fraser, who has some interesting thing to tell you as well today.
Very interesting things. Go for it,
Sounds like
Sean.
he doesn't know what I'm about to say. Merci tout le monde. C'est un plaisir d'être ici pour discuter les mesures qui luttaient la crise nationale de logement et qui assistaient dans l'effort de notre gouvernement de construire du logement plus rapidement. There's a few different categories that I'll break down some of the measures included in the fall economic statement, which represent the latest efforts to put policies in place that are going to help build more homes. There's measures designed to build more homes more quickly. There's measures designed to unlock supply that exists in the market today. There's some relief for people who are dealing with higher interest rates as a result of changes to their monthly mortgage payments. And there's a systemic change within government that I'd like to discuss around the operations that will allow us to better mirror or better tie together the housing policies with our infrastructure policies. So first, on addressing the challenge that we need to build more homes, there's several direct measures in place that are going to help finance the construction of housing in this country. The first is changes to the apartment construction loan program. This is a program that operates by allowing the federal government to pass on a low borrowing rate that we benefit from in exchange for commitments from home builders who offer apartments at prices at and below what the market will actually bear. There's an additional $15 billion that are going to recapitalize this program, which continues to operate with money that was already in the system. Just to demonstrate that this program is having success, the week before last, we rolled out more than $4 billion worth of loans that's going to result in the construction of almost 12,000 homes across this country. These are real projects, real buildings that are going to provide real homes for families, and the agreements are done and moving forward. We're going to continue to be able to issue more of these low-cost loans to builders to build homes more quickly for a long time into the future, with an additional $15 billion behind the program. In addition to the low-cost financing program that we've created, we have an opportunity to continue to invest directly in the construction of affordable housing to support low-income families. My view is your opportunity to have a roof over your head should not depend on whether you can afford a place in the market. The National Housing Strategy was built around the idea that we can be subsidizing directly the construction of affordable homes for low-income families, and to see an additional $1 billion injected into our program signals that we're going to continue to be making the investments necessary to build non-market housing stock in this country. But it's not enough for us to continue to put policies in place that will be future-oriented, though we must absolutely do that. There are things we can do in the short term to unlock supply that exists today. There's new measures that the finance minister has put in place around short-term rentals. Think about Airbnb, for example. The measures that we're putting in place involve changes to the tax system that are going to deny tax advantages to people who don't follow the rules within their municipalities or provincial governments, and funding that's put in place, $50 million to help with the enforcement of those rules at a municipal level. What we've seen in jurisdictions that have tried this is a remarkable degree of success extremely quickly. New York is one of the leading examples globally, where they had 22,000 units on the market, and a little more than a month later, after they put new measures in place, 19,000 of those 22 actually found their way onto the market for families to rent. My view in a housing crisis is that if a municipality determines that you have an opportunity to put homes on the market for families to rent for the long term, then you should do that instead of making them available for a few days at a time. Also, still, to bounce back, so my apologies for skipping over something important. Cooperative housing provides an opportunity over and above the affordable housing programs we have to continue to put homes on the market at prices that families can afford at different income levels. We're going to be moving forward with the in excess of $300 million we previously committed to earlier in the new year, and are making a change to the policy around the GST break that we're giving for new apartment construction by including cooperative housing developments in that program as well. We anticipate that this is going to expand construction of cooperative housing, which provides homes at reasonable prices for families, including a number of our colleagues who are representing their communities in Parliament today that are very proud to have grown up in co-op housing. We also know that people are struggling with the rising rate of interest given the impact it has on their monthly mortgage bills. The mortgage charter takes a series of rules and puts them in a single place so consumers actually know what they can be asking their financial institutions for. By going to your bank if you're in a distressed borrowing situation to ask for an extended amortization period, for example, that provides an opportunity for you to reduce your monthly payment. By dealing with additional competition on the market at the time of your renewal, we believe that it's going to create an ecosystem where competition will bring out the best offer for borrowers. By changing a series of rules, or rather putting a series of rules in place, in a single place for consumers to have access to, they're going to know what they can ask their bank for. My sense is there's a number of people who would love to have an opportunity to pursue some of the relief outlined in the mortgage charter that simply don't know that these are options for them. And by drawing attention to what consumers can ask for and what we expect financial institutions to offer, we can provide relief for people who are renewing their mortgage or perhaps who have a variable rate mortgage now, given the rapid changes to the rate of interest that exists in the economy. The last change baked into the fall economic statement I wanted to discuss, which I'm actually very excited about, is the formal merger of our housing and infrastructure work within the federal government bureaucracy. By collapsing housing and infrastructure into a single department, we're going to be able to better identify and adopt policies that will allow us to use our infrastructure investments to build more homes and ensure that our housing policies are designed with the vision of a complete community. It's not enough for us to build homes to act as storage units for people. We want them to be able to live and thrive in complete communities, and by marrying these two departments together into a single department, we'll be able to achieve that. And if I may take 20 more seconds, I wanted to provide a brief update on the rollout of the Housing Accelerator Fund. As of yesterday, we've signed an agreement with the municipality of Richmond Hill. This makes 11 agreements since September that we've signed. And according to the projections, not of the federal government, but directly from our partners who've signed these agreements with us, we are now, over the next 10 years, expecting to see the Housing Accelerator Fund lead to an additional 250,000 units. This is a policy that we've been rolling out just in the last few months. It's having a bigger impact than I expected, and I had very high expectations going in. What's exciting for me is the changes being made at a municipal level are going to have an impact in perpetuity. The systemic reforms are going to make it easier to build homes and to build the kinds of homes that will allow us to overcome the national housing crisis. I want to say thank you to the Finance Minister for bringing such a focus to housing in the fall economic statement. This latest suite of measures is going to make a meaningful difference and have an impact in the short term. With that, I'll hand the stage over to my colleague, Minister Anand.
Thank you so much, Sean. Bonjour tout le monde. Nous continuons de travailler pour notre population canadienne et pour notre économie. Ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle nous avons une cote de crédit AAA, un taux de chômage faible et le ratio de la dette au PIB le plus faible du G7. We also know that Canadians continue to feel the impacts of high interest rates and inflation. Through the fall economic statement, we're striking the balance between fiscal responsibility, that track that we are on, as well as being there to support Canadians every step of the way, just as we did in the pandemic. Over the past couple years alone, we've taken some very important steps. For example, $10 a day childcare. That has actually led to record labor market participation of 85.7% among women aged 25 to 54 years old. We're also helping over 380,000 children get the dental care they need through the Canada Dental Benefit while working towards a long-term Canadian dental care program. So those are some of the measures that we're going to continue to focus on as a government. And the gist is that we are focused on making life more affordable in every aspect of everyday life, whether it is in housing, whether it is in groceries, or whether it is in healthcare. Today, in that vein, I want to focus on junk fees. Depuis 2016, nous avons pris des mesures pour réduire les frais qui ajoutent du stress et des contraintes financières inutiles. Let me give you two examples. January 2020, the CRTC Internet Code made it easier for Canadians to understand their Internet service contracts to prevent bill shock from overage fees and price increases. June 2022, nous avons annoncé des modifications au cadre de protection des consommateurs de produits et services financiers afin d'aider les Canadiens à éviter les frais surprises. These are positive developments for Canadians, but we're not stopping there, and we will continue to take action to reduce junk fees, as outlined in the Fall Economic Statement. Right now, while most airlines will try to seat you in proximity to your child who is between 5 and 14 years old, it's not a guarantee. To guarantee that your child over 5 can sit next to you, you have to pay for seat selection. Standard seat selection for airlines can cost up to $60 per ticket for domestic travel, which can quickly add up to being nearly $100 or more just for a round trip for a family of 4 with 2 kids under 14. At this economic time, parents are experiencing the financial burden and frustration of deciding between saving some money or making sure their 7-year-old can sit next to them on their flight. That is why in the Fall Economic Statement, our government is seeking to ensure that airlines seat all children under the age of 14 next to their accompanying adult at no extra cost. Notre gouvernement s'est engagé à collaborer avec l'Office des transports du Canada pour modifier le règlement sur la protection des passagers aériens afin que les compagnies aériennes fassent asseoir tous les enfants de moins de 14 ans à côté de l'adulte qui les accompagne sans frais supplémentaires. Additionally, we're looking at another sort of junk fee, and that is non-sufficient fund fees charged by banks, or the NSF fees, that you may have experienced. These fees, which can currently be as high as $50, with no limit to how many times they can be applied, disproportionately impact Canadians with low income, or those who may not have access to overdraft protection due to their credit history. In an age where automated withdrawals are so frequently used for paying bills, Canadians should not have to carry the additional burden of worrying about an extra $50 that will come out of their account if their payment for their hydro bill does not go through. In December 2021, I want to point to an example from the United States where the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau released a report on the banking industry's excessive and unfair reliance on banking junk fees. Since then, 15 of their 20 largest banks have ended the practice of charging NSF fees. We would like to see Canadian financial institutions respond in a similar way. Nous voulons que nos banques fassent de même et suppriment ces frais inutiles. À la suite de notre étude d'ici le budget 2024, nous présenterons les mesures à prendre pour que cela se produise. In the months to come, we will come forward with more details on how we will continue to crack down on junk fees, because every dollar counts. When I was in academia, just a short time ago, I focused on how we can have greater rights for consumers in our economy. This work that we are doing in the Government of Canada is so very important for the affordability crisis that families are facing. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on these important measures to make unnecessary fees exactly that, unnecessary. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, we're ready to answer.
Okay, I am told hopefully that you'll have 20 minutes to answer questions. Let's try and get as many in as we can. We'll start with Mackenzie Gray from Global News.
Hi, Ms. Freeland. Debt servicing charges are going to double nearly in your fiscal outlook here in your fall economic statement that I have right in front of me. Will this limit your government's ability to spend on social programs?
As you heard from Minister Anand, our government has a fiscally responsible economic plan which allows us to make the necessary investments in Canadians and in good jobs for today and tomorrow. The proof points of that fiscal responsibility are our AAA credit rating, the fact that Canada has the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7. And that has a concrete benefit to Canadians. Our cost of borrowing is meaningfully lower than the cost of borrowing in the United States, which creates more space for us to do the things we need to do.
That's great that we have a AAA credit rating. It's excellent to hear
It
that
is.
debt to GDP is the lowest in the G7. But for folks who'd be reading this, they're going to look at 24-25 and see that we're going to spend more on public debt charges than we're spending on healthcare. How can you justify that?
High interest rates are a challenge for the whole world, and they are a challenge for every single person in Canada. And that is precisely why our government is so focused on an economic plan which allows us to make the necessary investments in Canada and Canadians, and also creates the conditions, helps to create the macroeconomic conditions which will make it possible for us all to return to a more normal macroeconomic environment. That's what we're focused on.
Jude O'Malley's, the Canadian Press.
Hi, following up on Mackenzie's questions. Mr. Fraser, you've talked a lot about the homelessness crisis, and you've spoken passionately about it. Communities are seeing tent cities when they weren't used to it. We also have lagging social housing in the country compared to the OECD average. Given the new restrictions on deficit spending that is in the fall economic statement, are you telling Canadians that you will not be able to tackle those kinds of big problems that they're facing? And if you are planning on tackling it, how will you do that? Is it higher taxes? Is it pushing provinces to spend more? What's your plan?
Thanks very much, and I'll do my best to give you a quick answer so we can make time for more questions. But please know this is a complicated subject that will take time to dig in appropriately. So the short answer to your question is that we are absolutely not signaling we're not going to invest in housing because there are restrictions around being responsible from a fiscal point of view. In fact, the very document that identifies the fiscal responsibility measures you're pointing to is also investing in excess of $16 billion to build more housing in Canada. And I think that's a proof point that we both want to build housing but operate within a sustainable fiscal framework as well. In order to actually overcome the challenges around homelessness, around the deficit in social housing, you have to understand that the challenges that we're living with today were 30 years in the making. Starting in the late 80s, certainly in the early 90s, under both Liberal and Conservative governments, decisions were taken by federal governments not to invest in affordable housing. Homelessness doesn't exist because of a person's ancestry. It doesn't exist because people live with mental illness. It's not just a factor of poverty. Homelessness exists because there's not enough affordable housing in communities. Nobody chooses to be homeless. Nobody chooses to live in a shelter. By making sustained investments over a period of time, we can build out that non-market stock. You pointed to the OECD average. We're less than half that in Canada. Thankfully, we got back into this space in 2017 with the National Housing Strategy, but we need to continue our commitment for the long term. We have seen hundreds of thousands of new units and renovated units come online for families that are being kept at reasonable prices today. But in order to solve the crisis, we can't just be looking at the social housing challenges. We must also do that. We have to build more supply for middle-class families too. When we actually put measures in place that reduce the cost of building, like the GST waiver, like the low-cost financing, like the Canada Mortgage Bond changes, we see an uptick in construction that's going to better even off the supply and demand that exists in the market, which has been proven to bring costs down for people over time. After we take care of that, if we continue to invest in affordable housing, we're also going to need to work to clear the bottlenecks that exist within municipalities, which is where the Housing Accelerator Fund comes in. At a certain point in time, even if we have a perfect policy framework, we're going to run into a new bottleneck, which is going to be the productive capacity of the Canadian workforce. We're looking at measures to more efficiently deploy the training resources that we have available to train a skilled workforce in Canada, to use targeted immigration programs to identify the skills that we don't have domestically, and to ramp up innovation and by supporting factory-built homes across Canada. There are more policies that we will want to roll out to develop that industrial capacity, and in the meantime, we know that we need to continue to support communities that are dealing with acute homelessness challenges, and we will be very soon rolling out the next allocation of the Reaching Home program, which is a multi-billion-dollar program designed to address those very specific acute needs around homelessness. All of these challenges are interconnected, but if we solve each of these constituent problems that contribute to the national housing crisis, then we can actually solve the national housing crisis.
I just have to add one thing, if I may.
Certainly.
You know, I see that the way people are framing this is that there is an inherent contradiction between fiscal sustainability and continuing to invest in an economic plan for Canada and Canadians. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. We absolutely believe in the necessity of investing in Canada and Canadians. You know, Sean has just been speaking passionately about investing in housing. We know how important that is. And it's precisely because we know how important these investments are. Investments in housing, investments in our economic plan, like the tax credits, which I discussed earlier and which we are now passing into law. We know these investments are essential. And we know that these are long-term investments. And the way that as a country, we can continue to make these investments and that we can assure Canadians we're there making these investments for the long term is to say we are making them in a fiscally sustainable way. So that's how we think about it, and that is actually the reality. You need to have both elements, and we do.
Just following up on that, the math, though, doesn't add up. When you look at the restrictions that you put on yourself and you look at what's needed in terms of infrastructure spending, how homelessness, I mean, pharmacare is a whole other thing. So the question again is, are you going to be looking at potentially raising revenues to tackle these kinds of big agenda items? Is it pushing provinces to do more? What's the strategy moving forward?
Again, you know, with due respect, I think the math absolutely adds up. And what you see in the fiscal framework that we laid out last week is a fiscally responsible economic plan that includes historic generational investments in the things that Canadians need. That plan, which we laid out, which is there, investments already made, includes $120 billion invested in an economic plan that is already delivering jobs and growth, is already delivering the highest level of foreign direct investment in the G7. That investment is there. That includes a historic national early learning and childcare plan. Those investments are there. That fiscal framework includes the Housing Accelerator Fund, which Sean has been delivering so magnificently. But the money for that is already in the plan, and we're rolling it out right now. So I would sort of urge people to be aware of the elements of the plan that have been put forward in previous budgets, in previous fall economic statements that are being rolled out every single day. And we're adding to those by lifting the GST on purpose-built rental, by adding to the apartment construction loan program. And we're going to keep on doing that.
Mylène La Presse.
J'aimerais savoir, concernant la mobilité de la main-d'œuvre, justement, pour la construction de logements, est-ce que vous êtes prête à aller jusqu'à couper des transferts aux provinces pour qu'elles obtempèrent?
Merci pour la question. Et on aura une réunion des ministres des Finances des provinces et territoires il y a quelques semaines. Nous pensons qu'un des éléments clés pour la croissance économique du Canada, pour la prospérité de chacun Canadien et Canadien, c'est d'avoir un marché à l'interne plus ouvert dans notre pays. Et c'est une chose qui ne coûte rien et on doit tous travailler plus pour avoir un marché plus ouvert. Et ça inclut le marché du main-d'œuvre. Alors, j'ai hâte de continuer la conversation autour de cette question avec mes collègues, les ministres des Finances des provinces et territoires.
Quand j'ai couvert la mise à jour économique, un des fonctionnaires du ministère des Finances me dit que ça pouvait inclure le bâton, pas seulement des incitatifs comme une carotte. Alors, je vais répéter ma question. Est-ce que vous êtes prête à couper des transferts aux provinces dans ce secteur-là?
On préfère toujours une approche collaboratrice avec les provinces et territoires. Et j'espère que tout le monde sera d'accord avec l'idée qu'on a tous besoin du croissance économique et on tous comprend à haut niveau qu'avoir un marché pan-canadien ouvert va nous donner plus de croissance économique. Et nous pensons qu'aujourd'hui, qu'on a si besoin de croissance économique, c'est vraiment le moment de pousser, de travailler tous ensemble pour avoir un marché qui est plus ouvert. Mais en bout de ligne, on est prêt à utiliser tous les outils que le fédéral a pour aider à convaincre nous tous d'ouvrir le marché.
Si je peux me permettre d'ajouter à ma collègue, la ministre Freeland, vous savez, la réforme de la concurrence, ça fait exactement un peu ce que la ministre disait, parce qu'une des choses qu'on constate au pays, pourquoi il y a des prix plus élevés, pourquoi on se rend compte dans certaines régions du pays, il n'y a pas le même niveau de concurrence, c'est effectivement, il faut libérer, je dirais, le marché canadien de la consolidation qu'on a vue au cours des dernières décennies. Et c'est pour ça que le travail de la ministre Freeland, ce qu'elle faisait avec le ministre Fraser, mais moi, je ramènerais, vous savez, l'élément le plus important pour ramener une économie plus compétitive à court, moyen et long terme, c'est la concurrence. C'est ça qui va faire qu'on va ouvrir des marchés, qu'on va offrir des opportunités d'une province à l'autre. Il y a plusieurs barrières non tarifaires entre les provinces, mais il y a aussi la consolidation. Vous avez vu, un des éléments dont je me permets de mentionner quand on parlait des clauses restrictives dans les baux. Imaginez aujourd'hui, vous avez un centre commercial, et de la façon que c'est structuré avec les ententes verticales, vous ne pouvez pas avoir de concurrent à certains kilomètres de ce centre commercial-là. Alors ça, c'est un frein. Moi, je peux vous dire, j'ai rencontré des investisseurs américains qui seraient intéressés à regarder le marché canadien de l'alimentation, puis ils me disent, Monsieur le ministre, quand on a regardé ça à l'époque, une des choses qu'on ne pouvait pas trouver au Canada, imaginez, c'était un espace commercial. Parce que la façon dont le marché est structuré au Canada, pour un joueur étranger qui veut rentrer, il y a très peu de possibilités. Alors, ce qu'on est en train de faire, ce que la ministre Freeland a mis dans la loi, ce qu'on dépose avec C-56, ça va nous permettre d'ouvrir ces marchés-là. Et en plus, avec la mobilité de la main-d'œuvre dont elle faisait mention, vous imaginez, ça, c'est des éléments qui vont permettre de faire de la prospérité, de la croissance économique qui ne coûtent rien. C'est pour ça qu'on dit qu'il faut que les conservateurs agissent. Moi, j'ai toujours dit, si vous voulez donner un cadeau aux Canadiens, là, passez C-56 avant Noël, parce que ça va donner des moyens de plus pour avoir de la prospérité au pays.
Radhamati, the logic.
Minister Freeland, on the digital services tax, what's happened to make your government wobble on the Jan 1st, 2024 date for it to take effect?
Our government's position is unchanged. Our government's position has always been, first, that we have a preference for a multilateral agreement. We have a preference for Pillar 1. We have also always said that if Pillar 1 did not come into force at the end of this year, as had been agreed, then Canada would have no choice but to introduce our own DST. And I know you know this, but for people who are not following it as closely, there is a real fairness issue here because other countries, our partners and allies, like the UK, like France, currently have a DST in place. And that DST is raising much needed revenue to support the British people, to support the French people. And so there really is an issue of fairness when it comes to Canadians, who we've just been talking about all the areas where they need government revenue to support them. So that's why this is an issue that our government actually has been very clear on. The final thing that I will say, and this Ways and Means motion is the next step on that path. The final thing that I will say is we always prefer finding a win-win outcome, and that is the case here, and we have been having constructive conversations with all our partners about this.
Also on the digital markets file, on the competition changes, the merger review seems to be an extension to 3 years for the review process from 1. I don't see anything explicit in the Ways and Means motion about abuse of dominance. So Minister Champagne, are you considering bright line rules or presumptions or any other changes to the abuse provisions specifically for digital markets?
Well, we'll have more to say as we bring the Budget Implementation Act, but what we want to do is we want to reform the way you have to prove dominance. As you know, the test today, you need to prove intent and effect, and I think we're looking at that to modernize the law. As you've seen, this is I would say, if you look at what Minister Freeland has done in Budget 2022, what we've done in C-56, and what we're doing now in the fall economic statement, it's probably the most comprehensive review in the last 37 years. I mean, last time was 1986. So this is, we did the down payment. We addressed issues that matter to Canadians on affordability, particularly with respect to grocery. And finally, we're coming to a set of measures, including the test to prove dominance. And, we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be changing that. But I would want to wait until we table legislation on that. But I can already signal to you that the fact that you sit in the fall economic statement, that we're going to be looking into that to bring, I would say, our laws in line with our G7 partners. We need to have more tools in the toolbox. Part of the challenge you're facing and why we had so much consolidation in this country is that we have outdated tools in the toolbox. The Competition Bureau, the Minister of Industry, this government, any government, we need more tools in the toolbox to tackle issues of consolidation in this country. And, for example, how you're going to have to prove dominance is something we're going to reform to make sure that we're best in class and in line with our G7 partners.
Okay, and I think Anita has something to add.
Sure. Having taught in this area for some time before becoming an elected member of Parliament, I just wanted to say and reiterate that the overhaul of our competition laws is overdue and is going to be transformative in terms of increasing the ability of firms to compete in our economy. And in particular, I want to focus just for a moment on the removal of the efficiencies defense in the competition law that we have known for so long in this country. That is absolutely revolutionary. In particular, the efficiencies defense has given rise to an astounding number of cases, and as a result, an astounding number of pieces of academic commentary and judicial decisions and regulatory decisions in terms of the interpretation of what the efficiencies defense actually means, including superior propane. So I will say that this is no small shakes here. This is serious overhaul of competition law in Canada, and it is positive for increasing competition and therefore bringing prices down for Canadians. Thank you.
And this will be our last question. Karina Gold from CBC News.
It's actually Karina Roman.
She's got a new job.
Yeah.
Karina Roman, sorry.
That's okay. Back on the digital services tax, this is a question for Minister Freeland. Can Canada enact or implement the DST unilaterally, or do you need the approval and agreement of the U.S. Congress to move on that?
We can act unilaterally.
And so if you can act unilaterally, what's holding us up? Why is there no date other than a potential date after January 1st?
Nothing is holding us up. I mean, this Ways and Means motion is the next step in very clear, very direct Canadian action, which we have been clear about. We've been very clear about our intentions with Canadians. We've been very clear about our intentions with our partners around the world. And this legislation is the next step. The government's position, Canada's position, is unchanged. I've pointed out, and I know, Karina, that you know this, it's really a matter of fairness. You know, there are other countries, our partners, who are today collecting a DST. That DST is helping make essential investments in their countries, and it's just not fair for Canadians to be deprived of that revenue. So that's our view, that's our position. We also really believe in working collaboratively with our partners. We have always preferred a multilateral outcome, and so we are continuing to talk about this with our partners around the world.
Can you just take one more on the Toronto deal announced yesterday? We haven't heard from you on that. That's fine.
Sure.
Yeah, so obviously
Okay.
Olivia Chow, Doug Ford announced a big deal. It's contingent on federal funding. That wasn't in the fall update, so to Majude's point, where's the math, where's the funding for cities?
That's not entirely true, as you know. The DVP, Ontario Place. So we were very glad to see Ontario and Toronto come to an agreement. Very glad to see Ontario take responsibility for some of the very important needs of the city, and glad to see Ontario's biggest city and Canada's biggest city have such an effective working relationship with the province. We also have a good working relationship with both the province and the city, and we're going to keep on working together. And I'll just conclude by saying that no federal government of Canada has, in Canada's history, invested in Canada's cities as much as our government has done, and no federal government has invested in the city of Toronto as much as our federal government has done. We heard from Sean outlining the housing accelerator investments, just one of the many, many investments that the city of Toronto is getting from our government, many times more than the city was receiving when we formed government. We're proud of that. We believe in investing in cities. We're going to continue to do that. We're glad to see the province stepping up and doing its share, and really glad, I'll say, to see that collaborative working relationship. It's how we believe in working across the country too. Thank you very much. We'll be late for QP.
Une question en français. Il y a juste une question en français, s'il vous plaît, sur la taxe digitale.
Non, je m'excuse. On sera en retard pour la période des questions. Je m'excuse. Je m'excuse. On sera en retard.